Someone texts you just enough to keep you from leaving. Not enough to choose you, not enough to build anything, not enough to make the situation clear, just enough to make you wonder if maybe there's still something there. A random "hey stranger," a heart reaction to your story, a message at midnight that feels casual, but somehow lands exactly where it was supposed to. Then, right when you start paying attention again, they disappear back into their real life. And that's the strange part. They don't seem to actually want you, but they also don't want you gone. Most people explain this by saying they don't know what they want. Sometimes that's true. People are messy, feelings overlap, timing gets weird, attraction doesn't always arrive with a plan. But sometimes, they're not confused at all. They know they don't want a relationship. They know they are not going to fully show up. They know they are not making space for you in any serious way. But they also know that if they send one small message, you might still respond. And that response gives them something. Not love, not commitment, access. That's where things get uncomfortable, because access can feel like affection when you're the person receiving it. If someone keeps checking on you, flirting with you, liking your pictures, remembering small details, and returning every few weeks, it can feel like proof that something matters. But sometimes it's not proof that they want you. Sometimes it's proof that they like knowing they still can. That's the difference most people miss. Some people do not want the relationship. They want the option. They want the comfort of knowing that somewhere out there is a person who still answers, still softens, still gives them a version of themselves they like better. Because being wanted does something strange to the brain. It creates a mirror. When someone still wants you, you get to see yourself as desirable without having to do much. You don't have to commit. You don't have to be consistent. You don't have to risk being fully known. You can just send a message and watch another person light up. That can become addictive. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, ordinary way. The way people keep old clothes they never wear. The way people save screenshots they never open. The way people leave tabs open for weeks because closing them feels too final. Some people do that with people. They keep a person open. And what makes it worse is that it doesn't always look cruel from the inside. The person doing it may not think, I am manipulating this person. They may think, I'm just checking in. They may think, we're both adults. They may think, I never promised anything. Technically, maybe they didn't. But emotionally, they know there is a door being left cracked open on purpose. Because, if the door closes completely, the option is gone. The person may move on, the attention may disappear, the backup version of the relationship may stop existing. And for someone who likes access more than intimacy, that's the real threat. Not losing love, losing supply. Look at the pattern. They show up when they are lonely. They show up after a bad date. They show up after a breakup. They show up when the person they actually want disappoints them. They show up when their ego gets bruised, and they need to remember that somebody somewhere still sees them a certain way. Then when they feel better, they vanish. You were the emotional charger. And that is where the whole thing starts to feel ugly. Because the person being kept around is often not being loved. They are being stored. Stored for boredom. Stored for validation. Stored for the night nobody else answers. Stored for the moment when someone needs proof they still have power over another person's attention. It is not always romance. Sometimes it is emotional hoarding. And hoarding is not about needing everything you keep. It is about being afraid to let things go. That is why people can keep someone around even when they know they do not want them. Letting go would require accepting the loss of a possibility. It would require saying, this person is no longer available to me. And some people hate losing availability more than they love the person. So they do the smallest possible thing. They do not make plans, they hint at them. They do not say they miss you. They say something that lets you imagine it. They do not confess feelings. They send a song, a memory, a joke, a half-serious message that can be taken 3 different ways depending on how much hope the reader still has. That ambiguity is not an accident. Ambiguity protects them. If you ask what they want, they can say, I was just being nice. If you pull away, they can say, I thought we were cool. If you get emotional, they can act surprised that you misunderstood something they were very carefully making easy to misunderstand. That is the cruel genius of almost. Almost gives just enough to keep hope alive. Almost a date, almost an apology, almost a real conversation, almost a confession, almost a return. Almost something that could become something if you just waited a little longer. But almost is a place where people can waste years, because the brain is terrible at grieving unfinished things. Clear endings hurt, but they give the mind a shape. Ambiguous endings keep moving. They change meaning depending on your mood. One day you think it is over. The next day, they react to your story, and suddenly the whole case reopens, and your brain starts collecting evidence again. Maybe they still care. Maybe the timing was wrong. Maybe they were scared. Maybe this means something. Maybe this is the moment where it finally becomes clear. But often, clarity was already there. The confusion was the answer. People who want access without responsibility usually avoid clarity, because clarity would end the arrangement. It would force them to either choose you or release you, and they do not want either one. Choosing requires responsibility. Releasing requires loss. So they keep you in the middle. That middle can feel strangely intimate. That is why it works. They know your soft spots. They know the memory to bring up. They know the nickname, the song, the inside joke, the exact tone that makes the old version of things feel close again. But nostalgia is easy when nothing is required after the message. A person can miss the feeling of being wanted by you without wanting the responsibility of loving you. They can miss your attention without missing your life. They can miss the version of themselves they got to be around you without wanting to actually return. That is the part nobody wants to admit. Sometimes when someone comes back, they are not coming back for you. They are coming back for the mirror. They want to see if they still look good in your eyes. And if you still look at them the same way, they get what they came for. They get the relief, the ego repair, the proof that the door still opens. Then they leave again. Because the hunger was never for a relationship. It was for confirmation. This is why backup attention is so dangerous. It does not always feel like being used at first. Sometimes it feels flattering. It feels powerful. It feels like patience. It feels like history. It feels like maybe you are the person they cannot fully forget. But being remembered is not the same as being chosen. A person can keep remembering you because forgetting would cost them something. They would lose the safety net. They would lose the audience. They would lose the quiet comfort of knowing they still have somewhere to land if everything else goes badly. That is not romance. That is storage. And once you see it, the behavior starts looking different. The late-night text is not random. The vague compliment is not harmless. The sudden warmth after weeks of distance is not necessarily a breakthrough. Sometimes it is just someone checking the lock on a door they have no intention of walking through. They just want to know it still opens. So maybe the real reason people keep someone around just in case is not always that they are evil. It is not always that they are confused. It is not always that they secretly love you and don't know how to say it. Sometimes it is because attention is easier to collect than intimacy. Intimacy asks something from you. Attention gives something to you. Intimacy requires presence, honesty, consistency, and risk. Attention can be pulled from a phone screen in 8 seconds with one carefully timed message. That is why some people do not keep options open. They keep people open. And maybe the most uncomfortable part is that many people have done a smaller version of this somewhere, kept a message thread alive longer than necessary, enjoyed being wanted by someone they did not really want back, left a little possibility floating because fully ending it felt too harsh, too final, or too inconvenient. That does not make it harmless. Because to one person, it is just a backup light left on in the distance. To the other person, it can look like sunrise. That is the damage of keeping someone around just in case. It turns another person's hope into your emergency supply. It takes their willingness to care and converts it into something you can use when you feel low. And the person being kept may spend months trying to understand the mixed signals, when the signals were never mixed. They were measured. Just enough warmth to prevent goodbye, just enough distance to avoid responsibility, just enough intimacy to keep the door cracked. So maybe the better question is not why people keep someone around just in case. Maybe the better question is why being half-wanted can feel so close to being love. Because from far away, they can look similar. Someone still texts. Someone still remembers. Someone still circles back. But love does not just keep access. Love makes room. And if someone only shows up to make sure you are still available, maybe they are not returning because they finally see your value. Maybe they are returning because they are afraid someone else will.